Hello everyone, and welcome to the third video in the Tunnel Construction Risk Management Visualization series. In previous videos, we mapped in the work breakdown structure, created the project schedule, and the financial report, all of which is leading us towards putting together our overview dashboard. In this video, we are adding in the risk register. To create the risk register, we are going to use the cause, risk, effect format. This format is read as a result of the cause, this uncertain risk event will occur, which could, would, or may lead to this effect. Using this format allows you to differentiate risks from facts, makes your risks more defined, and provides better quality risk information to stakeholders. I have provided the risk register Excel file for you to use in your Power BI project to follow along. This is the format of the risk register I am using for this tunnel construction project example. Your risk register can, and in many cases should, be more comprehensive than this and include elements such as if a risk is still active and more. You can visit pmi.org to find a PMI compliant register. Having well-defined risks, whether they are positive risks called opportunities or negative risks called threats, is important so the probability and impact can be as accurate as possible. Probability and impact scales are used by stakeholders to judge how likely a risk is to occur and its impact if it does occur. The risk score is a product of the probability and impact and allows us to rank the risk and prioritize them to perform quantitative analysis, for example, expected monetary value, or EMV, and Monte Carlo simulation on high-ranking risks. Let's get started. I have created my risk register Excel file in SharePoint and will import it into Power BI. If this is the first video you are watching or you don't know how to do this, watch the first and second videos for step-by-step how you do this import into Power BI. Back in Power BI, create a new page and rename it to Risk Register. Back in Power BI, create a new page and rename it to Risk Register. Now that the risk register data has been imported into Power BI, you can create the risk register table using the table visualization. And from the risk register table, bring in cause, risk, effect, risk, effect, risk owner, probability, impact, and risk score. So now let's take a look at our table and see what we have. Okay, I'm going to make this wider so we can see our results. So I'm going to make our canvas bigger. So again, you can click anywhere outside the visual, go to Format, go to Canvas Settings, change it to Custom, the type to Custom, and I'm going to make this wider to about, we'll say 1500 for now, until I can make sure I can see my entire table. And that looks good. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Zoom out. Okay, so here's our risk register. So I'm just going to rename risk score, sum of risk score to risk score, sum of impact to impact. Probability looks good. Risk owner, effect, risk, and cause. Okay. Now we don't need the totals here. So I'm going to go again and click on Format. I'm going to go to Totals. I'm going to turn off the total value. Okay. Okay. I still want to see the full risk register, so I am going to change the format again of the canvas setting, and I'm going to increase the height to 1000 so then I can see the entire risk register. There we go. Okay, so this is our risk register. For our risk register, we want to be able to find or search for the risk by category. So I'm going to move over the risk register table. I'm going to add a slicer here for category. So I'm going to click slicer, make this smaller, and then I'm going to go back to my risk register table, and I'm going to bring in the category. So if I would like to see which risks are associated with cost and procurement, I would click category cost and procurement. And just to be sure that we can select more than one category at a time, open up the format pane, say slicer settings, go to slicer settings, go to selection, and then turn off multi-select. Close that down, and now you have the ability to select more than one category. Okay, so we also want to add one more slicer. So I want to add another slicer that allows me to see the top risks quickly. So I'm going to move down the risk register table. I'm going to add that slicer at the top. I'm also going to move down the category slicer so they align. Okay. To add the slicer for the risk score, I'm going to select outside my visuals. I'm going to click slicer, and then I'm going to drag in the risk score on top of the slicer. And this will allow us to see only the risk score, the risk with the risk scores that we're particularly interested in. So if I would like to see the risk events with the highest risk scores, I can move it up like so, or I can move it down. Or if I want to see the risks with the lower scores, I can move this side of the slicer down. So I'm going to leave this at the top, like so. Now I would like to see which risk owners own how many of these risks. So I'm going to add another visualization here, the donut chart. First, I'm going to move down categories, and I'm going to move down the risk register. Now I want to know which of the risk owners own how many of these risks each. So I'm going to expand my page one more time, and I'll put it to 1300, and this will allow me to move my visuals down further so I can add one at the top. So I'm going to move down the risk register table, and I'm also going to move down the category slicer. So I'll move this slicer slightly down. Okay. So now I'm going to click on the donut chart, and I'm going to say that I would like to know for a risk owner, so I'm going to drag and drop risk owner, how many risks are owned by the risk owners? Like, how are they split up between the risk owners? And I'm going to say values. Sorry, that risk should have been values. And this is the count of risks. So this visual is now showing us that David Montgomery owns 16, Eileen Wiggins owns 10, and then Herman Robinson owns 12. Okay, that's it for now for our risk register. Again, we're building towards creating our overview, and this is one of the pieces that are going to feed into that. The next thing we're going to do is visualize our risk ranking. So create a new page, and rename it to risk ranking. We already have all of the data that we need to do this visualization. So again, we're going to take a table visual and we're going to add in the risk, the probability, the impact, and the risk score. Okay. And we're just going to rename the columns and clean this up. We can once again make our page larger so we can see the entire table. I believe it was 1,000. And that should be good. There we go. You can turn the titles off if you don't need them. That's not. Probability, impact, and risk score. Okay. And now we want to visualize the risk ranking of the risk score. So if we sort the risk score, it's obvious to us where these risks rank, but visually we want to know immediately, if that's not sorted, which risks rank the highest, and those risks will be prioritized for quantitative analysis. Select the funnel visual, and onto the funnel visual, we're going to add the risk as a category and the risk score as values. There you go. So now this allows you to see, for all the risks that you have, where the majority of these risks fall. So if, for example, you would like to take all risks above 40 or 45 and send them to quantitative analysis, you can kind of see quickly and easily how many and what percentage of your total risks that would be. So that really does help you visually to see the priority of the risks and how you should treat them. So I'm just going to clean this up, the title of this. I'm going to go to Format, and I'm going to remove the sum. I'm going to say risk score. I'm going to call this risk ranking. The next visual we're going to create are for our planned risk response. Create a new page and rename it to planned risk responses. Before we continue and add the planned risk responses, let's go to our table view and take a look at the risk register. So a risk, and particularly in our risk register, they've been identified as either threats or opportunities. A threat being a danger to the project and an opportunity being a benefit. Depending on whether the risk is a threat or an opportunity, the risk response is different. For threats, the risk responses are to avoid, mitigate, transfer, escalate, or accept the threat. For opportunities, the responses are to exploit, enhance, share, escalate, or accept the risk, which is a benefit. So in the risk register, you'll either see mitigate, avoid, you'll see the response depending on if it's a threat or an opportunity, and we want to sort and determine how many of these responses we have for our risks. So going back to our report view, you can now click Table, and in the risk register, bring in risk and the risk response. Add it here as a column. And then we want to see visually what is the breakdown of these risk responses. So you can do this by type, you can do this by the responses itself. So let's go ahead and do it by the responses themselves. Add a pie chart. And I'm going to bring in the response from the risk register and the risks. So now we can see how much mitigation is happening, how much transferring is happening, how much enhancing, etc. is happening. All the risk responses, what is the percentage of each of them happening? Now I wish to update the labels of this pie chart. So I'm going to go to Detail Labels, and I'm going to go to Options. And instead of Data Value Percent of Total, I'm going to select Category Percent of Total. So this way we can clearly see the labels of Avoid, Accept, Exploit, Enhance, and Mitigate. And now I'm going to make this smaller. I'm going to also rename the title of this visual from Count of Risk by Response to Risk by Response. So I'm going to open title. I'm going to remove the count of, and it's now going to just say risk by response. I'm going to visually clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to click outside my visuals. I'm going to expand my canvas so I can see my entire visual much easier. 1,000. Okay. And there we have it. So now if we want to quickly know which of the risks were mitigated, we can click on mitigate and we can see these are all the risks that were mitigated, etc., enhanced, and so on and so forth. Thank you for watching this video. In the next two videos, we're going to move into quantitative analysis, doing expected monetary value and Monte Carlo simulation. See you in the next video.